The bill's due for 2 days of detailed consideration in the Lords next week, and peers had been lining up to vote through important changes in the teeth of government opposition. So to explain why this is so important, I turned to Professor Catherine Barnard of Cambridge University, who's also a Fellow of the UK in a Changing Europe think tank. How much of this EU law is there anyway?
That's $1 million question. Nobody knows the answer. Back in October time, we thought there was about 2,400 pieces of retained EU law. Then they discovered another 1,400 pieces. And if you look at the dashboard, which the government has published, it now records 4,829 pieces. So the fact the figure keeps going up suggests that the government keeps finding bits of retained EU law, and this has created considerable legal uncertainty. And this retained EU law covers a vast range of activities. It covers workers' rights, environmental rights. It also covers airline safety, gas safety, food safety, issues that to many people are the day-to-day minimum requirements for a safe standard of living, but for some people they're seen as red tape, and that was a view that Jacob Rees-Mogg took, and he said all of this law should go.
And so you would have had a situation where there might have been no law on some aspect of aircraft safety unless the government had managed to step in with a quick replacement for it, a sort of British version of that law.
Exactly right. Or there were also powers in the bill to keep some legislation. And indeed, Kemi Badenoch said that because the civil servants were so worried about losing really important bits of legislation, their focus has actually been on preserving rather than getting rid of the legislation, the original aspirations behind the bill.
So what's she done now? Because she's now changed the way this bill is going to operate, although the objective is still the same, eventually replacing or reforming all that EU law that's still there.
What seems to have happened is that under the original version of the bill, the default was everything must go. Under what seems to be the new version of the bill, the default is everything will stay, except for some hundreds of provisions which will be listed in a schedule to the bill, and these provisions will be turned off by this legislation.
And the point of that is that it gives Parliament a chance to look at what's scheduled for execution, if you like, and decide whether it deserves that or something different needs to be done.
That's absolutely right, and that would mean that there would be some parliamentary scrutiny. But that's not the end of the story, because even though the default appears to have been switched, the rest of the powers in the bill stay very much in the bill, including turning off the supremacy of EU law, and the British courts will be encouraged to be much more enthusiastic about departing from pre-Brexit case law.
And another thing is that ministers will still have a huge power to just rewrite this law with pretty limited parliamentary scrutiny, if any at all.
That's right. This bill contains significant Henry VIII powers, and these Henry VIII powers essentially give government ministers powers to turn off retained EU law without having full scrutiny by Parliament as a whole. And critics would say this legislation takes back control not to Parliament but to the executive.